Solar energy is absolutely everywhere, but it's got this massive, kind of surprising problem. And the craziest part, it has nothing to do with the actual solar panels. So, what's the deal?
Okay, so here's the puzzle we're up against. The hardware, right? The panels, the inverters, all that stuff has gotten so cheap. I mean, it's literally never been cheaper. But, and this is a big but, the total cost to actually get a solar project up and running, that price is just stubbornly high. It's not coming down nearly as fast. The lines on the graph just aren't matching up. So what gives? So, what's the invisible anchor here? What's holding back a technology that honestly should be soaring? It's a massive question, and the answer is crucial for the whole energy transition. Well, the problem is something the industry calls soft costs. And no, that's not the hardware. It's everything else. We're talking sales, design work, getting financing, dealing with permits, the whole shebang. And get this, these costs are now the biggest chunk of a project's price tag, and they are just not dropping the way they need to.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Those high soft costs, they're really just a symptom of something much deeper, a major market failure. The real bottleneck, the thing we've got to solve, is this widespread issue of trust, or more accurately, a lack of it. Let's call it the confidence gap.
Okay, the confidence gap. Let's break that down. What exactly is it? And more importantly, why is this uncertainty so unbelievably expensive for literally everyone, from the person putting panels on their roof to the biggest Wall Street investors?
Okay, so at its core, this whole confidence gap thing exists for one simple reason. The entire solar industry runs on, well, guesses, not precise measurements, but predictions. Think about it. Every single project is sold and financed based on an estimate of how much power it's supposed to produce. And where do those estimates come from? Models, fed by satellite data, guessing at sunlight from miles up in space.
And here's the kicker. Even the absolute best, most advanced simulations the industry has, they still have an average error of 5.4%. Now, you might be thinking, 5.4%, that doesn't sound so bad, right? But in the world of high-stakes project finance, a 5.4% margin of error isn't just bad, it's toxic. It injects a huge amount of doubt into the system, and believe me, that doubt costs a lot of money.
And this is exactly where those satellite estimates just completely fall apart, because they can't see the little things on the ground. Stuff like the shadow from one skinny power line, or a little vent pipe on a roof, or even a tree branch that's grown a bit. Things that might only cover, say, 1 or 2% of the panels. Seems like no big deal, right?
Wrong. It's a huge deal. See, because of the ways solar panels are wired together, that one tiny little shadow can set off this chain reaction of electrical losses. And it can cut the system's total energy output by a shocking 30 to 50%. I mean, that's a massive, devastating blow. And the remote satellite estimates, they are completely blind to it. No idea it's happening.
And that tiny shadow thing, micro shading, that's just the first of what you could call the four horsemen of inaccuracy. Then there's dynamic soiling, site-specific dust and pollen that satellites can't see. Next up, albedo variability, a fancy way of saying satellites can't tell how much light is really bouncing off the ground. And finally, you've got simple metadata errors. Just a typo, a simple human mistake can throw the whole model off. All of these things are completely invisible from space.
So, okay, if the problem is this huge gap between the guess from space and the reality on the ground, then the solution is obvious, right? We have to bridge that gap. And the industry doesn't really need another new simulation tool. What it desperately needs is a way to check its work, to validate the numbers it's feeding into the tools it already has. It needs a validation layer that's built on ground truth. And here's how that actually works. It's pretty cool. You take a portable sensor right to the project site, on the ground. It soaks up all this super detailed real-world data, sunlight, shade, everything. Then, an AI takes that short-term but incredibly accurate ground data and uses it to fix and calibrate 20 years' worth of the long-term satellite data. The result? You get this hyper-accurate forecast that shows what that specific site is truly capable of. And that gold standard data, you just plug it right back into the design tools everyone's already using. The best way to think about it is like this. It's basically creating a Carfax report, but for a solar project. You wouldn't buy a used car without one, right? Same idea. Before you sink hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars into a project, you get a verified, boots-on-the-ground report that tells you the true value and potential of that asset. It's a total game changer. You're swapping out speculation for straight-up verification. Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, but does it actually work in the real world? Well, let's get to the proof. There was this huge pilot study in Gujarat, India. I mean, this was massive. 100 different solar companies, over 1,200 site assessments, and the goal was simple. See what happens when you swap out the satellite guesses for real ground truth. And let me tell you, the results, they were just astounding. All right, result number one. The average sales cycle, the time it takes to go from a first meeting to a signed contract, it dropped by 61.4%. Think about that. Projects that used to drag on for over 8 months were now closing in just over 3. All that analysis paralysis, all that hemming and hawing caused by doubt, it just, poof, it vanished. Second, and this one is a really big deal, the lead conversion rate went up by more than 5 times. So an installer who was maybe closing, say, 5 out of every 100 leads was now closing almost 30 of them. That fundamentally changes their entire business. Suddenly, you need way fewer leads to hit your sales numbers. It completely rewrites the economics. And number 3, the engineering time. The hours that engineers had to spend crunching numbers for each proposal before a sale was even made, that dropped by over 68%. This is huge because it frees up these brilliant, highly skilled engineers from wasting their time on proposals that are just going to go nowhere. Instead, they can focus on designing the projects that are actually getting built. So let's just stop for a second and put all that together. The sales cycle slashed by over 60%. Your odds of actually closing a deal, more than 5 times better. The workload on your engineering team cut by 2/3. Look, these aren't just little improvements. This is a complete top-to-bottom transformation of how this business is done. And it's all because they replaced guesswork with data you can actually trust. But beyond all the amazing numbers, this quote from one of the people in the pilot, it really hits on the human element. He said when we showed the client the actual data from his own place, all his doubts were just gone. Trust was built up immediately. See, it's not just about the data. It's about that feeling. It's about building confidence. So let's zoom out. What does all this mean for the big picture? Because solving this data problem for one installer at a time, that actually has these massive ripple effects that can speed up the entire energy transition. Okay, to really get the huge financial impact here, we need to talk about a kind of nerdy but super important term, WACC. That stands for Weighted Average Cost of Capital. The easiest way to think of it is as a risk fee. It's what banks and investors charge you for the loan. And the rule is simple. The more uncertain they are about your project making money, the higher that risk fee is going to be. And the impact of this is just massive. When you can walk into a bank with validated ground truth data instead of a satellite guess, you fundamentally de-risk the entire project for them. They see less risk, so they charge you a lower risk fee, a lower WACC. And that alone can cut the total cost of the energy from that project by 5, maybe even 10%. It's simple. Better data literally makes solar power cheaper for everybody. So it all comes back to this. We have spent decades, literally decades, focused on making the silicon and solar panels cheaper and cheaper. But the real bottleneck today, the thing that's really slowing us down, it isn't the technology anymore. It's the friction. It's the financial and even the psychological drag caused by this fundamental lack of trust. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. We're always talking about sun and wind as our key renewable resources. But as we're racing to build this clean energy future, what if the most powerful, the most valuable, and maybe the most overlooked renewable resource of all is just verifiable trust?